Hello all, welcome to Think Automation YouTube channel. If you want to learn more about Qtest, Tosca and other Tricentis products, then this is the right YouTube channel for you. Please hit the subscribe button and share this video to your friends across so that the knowledge will reach to more people like you. Alright, the topic for the day is how to do API testing using Tricentis Tosca. How to create module from the scratch, how to do the actual validation in APIs, how to implement different kinds of authorization and different kind of parameters and all validation using Tosca. All these kind of functionality and feature we are gonna see today in the topic. Right. Let's go into the actual topic with some sample APIs. Today what we are having some sample site where we have some sample APIs configured. So this is a sample site I'm using, Vickers.in. Again, you have different kinds of API with different method. You have get method and you have post, put, patch, delete. All those for all of these you have some samples configured within the sample site. You can also refer and use this site. Right. Let's see. I have already using Postman to see the request and response for these so that we'll get a comparison how to use Tosca and how easy it can be configured and validated using Tosca. Right. Let's go with a sample get API. Today I will be covering couple of API methods, get and post, and rest of the methods are basically all the methods will be behaved same in Tosca. Right, let's go into the API validation. So here the API is about retrieving all the users available in the site or in the application. So once you hit this URL, so up to this is the common standard endpoint and this will be called as the API specific URLs that we use to configure. So once you hit that, you are receiving how many users are there, how many pages are there, and all the users detail are getting retrieved here. And we are also seeing 200 OK response. So typically in Postman or other API tools like SOAP AI, in all of these, we'll be writing scripts saying that to validate whether it is having 200 OK response or not, to validate how many users there or not. All those stuff we'll be validating. Right. When coming to post method, we are trying to create a new user to the site or application itself, where we are giving some JSON body with some name and job title, and the users are getting created successfully. And you can see 201 created message coming up. So since it's a sample site, you do not have any authorization configured for the site itself, but otherwise you can use the required authentication in your customer specific application. Either you can use basic or bearer token, or in some cases you might be using OAuth 2.0. So whatever the authentication that is configured in your application, you can use that during real time testing. Right. Let's see how the same API validation can be automated using Tricentis Tosca without any code involvement. Right. So where it is handled in Tosca you will have a component called API testing, under which you will see something called API scan. When you go to the home page of your Tosca commander, you will see an additional tab API testing. There you can see something called API scan. If you invoke that, then the API related stuff you can do over there. The first precondition should be either you need to be in any component level folder or you need to be at project level folder. That needs to be checked out. So it is always recommended that you create a separate component folder so that whatever API test cases that you are creating, that will get imported directly into this component folder, and then you can refine that, and always you can cut and paste to your real modules or real test cases. Right. What I'm gonna do, I have checked out my component folder. I'm coming here to API testing and I'm launching my API scan. So once it is launched, you will be able to see a place where you can configure request, endpoint URL, resource, everything. So here you can see automatically a new project is created and a blank empty message is created. Right. You have two, three options here to give your request or Swagger documentation. So by default, either you can give the all these details manually, whatever payload that you are using, endpoint, all this stuff you can give them manually. Right. The other option will be if you have Swagger file configured, you can import that and automatically the request will get loaded. Similarly, you have an option to URI. If you have Swagger URL configured, then you can always just give that URL here, and after that your request will get imported successfully. Now for this demo purpose, we are going to see everything in a manual way so that you will get a better understanding. The first API, what I'm going to do, I'm going to see the get API, right? So this is the URL of the endpoint up to this. So I'm just copy pasting each and every detail here. I will be copy pasting the URL and then followed by resource. The resource is nothing but slash API slash user. This will be different. The resource will be different for each and every API. The endpoint, this endpoint will be common for a application. Right. So now what I'm gonna do, this is a simple get API, right? So you don't need to give any payload. You just need to verify whether you need to give parameter authorization and other headers or not. So for this, I'm not gonna give any parameter, but you can also give the parameter. However, it is configured in Postman in similar way it will work. Okay, key value and description. So the same thing you can give it here. Either you can push the parameter to path or header or query, whatever you want. In similar way, you can use that. And with respect to authorization, here Tosca supports these kind of authorization, the typical basic authentication or OAuth 2.0, whatever you are using, you can use that. And this is also supporting AWS client certificate, Java key store, all other authentication as well. In addition to that, you can also manually import, give the authorization header, something like authorization equal to bearer with some token value. You can always give that as well here. Right. Just I'm gonna hit this request now. How you need to hit this request? You need to click on something called run here. Once you click on run, the request will get executed and you will receive the response. Whatever response you are receiving in the postman, the same response we are receiving here. We can take a look. So it is also giving us the status code and how much time it took to get the response. All those detail you'll be able to get. And you can rename this request. I'm just renaming this to get users. Right. So I'm gonna add one more request here. So there are two approach. You can either save a single request and import that back into Tosca commander and you can work on. Or whatever if you are gonna automate end-to-end API scenario, you will have multiple API requests here. So all the API requests you can combine it in a single folder and after that you can import back to Tosca commander. I'm gonna add one more request now. I'm just clicking on create message. So I'm just renaming this to create user, which will be a just renaming once again create user, which will be a post request, right? I'm just changing this to post request now, right? As I told, the endpoint will be the same across this API, right? I'm just copy pasting the endpoint and the resource. Resource will be changing for each API, right? So I'm gonna check what is the resource. It is just API users, right? I'm just gonna see. I'm also gonna verify this URL in the sample application. If you go to the create, you see that API users. So this is a resource that we need to give. And there is also a sample payload. Since this is a post method, we need to give the payload as well. So I'm just already copied this into my postman, something like this, right? And I have given some name. The same kind of body, request body, I'm gonna copy paste into my Tosca commander API scan now. Just copy pasting this. And you can see this in the additional headers. These are all default headers provided by Postman, right? And you can see something called application content type equal to JSON. We have not given this value in header. I'm just going to click on run now. Let's see. Yeah, the API assets is working correctly now. It taken all your payloads in the request correctly and it gives back the response correctly. So that's how you need to create your API request and response using API scanning component in Tosca. As a next step, we'll be trying to import this back into Tosca Commander and we'll be creating validation points. What is meant by validation point? Now we have actually scanned the API process, how the request will be, how the response should be. But we have not created any validation like something like how many users are here, whether the response is equal to 200 okay or not. All those stuff we are not aware still. So we'll educate that to Tosca to create proper test cases with proper test steps. So to do that, what you need to do, you need to click on this API case. Just click on that, then it will get imported back to Tosca Commander. The moment you click, there will be modules created, there will be test cases created automatically. So as a next step, what you need to do, so if you go to this module, you will see that there will be separate module for request and response. And there will be separate test steps for request and response. That's how Tosca behaves. There will be couple of steps always for each API call. So whatever request you want to give in request, you can always go and change, and based on that response also will get changed. You can separate the validation. Okay, now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna cut this, or you can leave it here as well, or if you want to align it in a better format, I'll be cut paste into my existing module section. But for demo purpose, I will leave as it is. I will try to concentrate on module and module attributes now. So once you are here, if you come and see that, you will not see any module attribute, you will see only the top level module only. What you need to do to create module attributes for the APIs. Okay, the moment you go to technical view, you see multiple options here, however we scanned that. So basically what I will do, I will just do control A, and I will just, here if you see there are additional option to create module attribute. Okay, you no need to worry about that. Just do control A and you can just click on add. The moment you add, so all the module attributes will get added, one for each line um, in your request. So name is a one module attribute, job is another module attribute. Like that, the module attribute will get created automatically. There are some cases where you don't want to create module attribute for all the lines in your request. At that time, you can simply click name and you can click on add. That will create module attribute only for name, not for job. So like that, you can customize your request module attribute. And in similar way, I'm gonna create module attribute for my endpoint, and I know that resource will always be will not be changing. For example, if this test case is going to be executed in UAT or SIT or in other environment as well, then only the endpoint of the application will be changing. The resource will not change, right? It will be always API users. So I'm not gonna scan that. Right. Similarly, I'm gonna scan my response as well. So in my response, I will be validating my status code as well. So first step, I will be adding the status code. The status code is now added to my module attribute, and the whole response as well. I will be try to add. Right. All the request and response are correctly captured in my module now. Right. You here you do not have any headers, but yeah, there are some response header you have. You can always go and capture this response header as well. So, for example, you can give something like date as well. You can try to capture. So then the date will get captured in your module attribute as well. So something like this, whatever is available in your request and response, all the stuff can be captured as a module attribute. If you come here, either if you are given any parameter, that as well can be added as a module attribute. All those stuff you can add as a module attribute, and you can keep on changing the test data during your test case execution. Right. Now we have created a module for this post request, right? So what I'm gonna do, let me come here to details. So the moment I added my module attribute, all the module attribute will automatically get displayed in my test step, right? So I'm gonna give some random name, and I'm gonna give some any random data, and by default the default endpoint will be captured and it will be in a default value. If you want, you can give that value, or else you can change this value and execute in a different environment. You can also give something like TCP value, where you can store this endpoint, or buffer value, whatever the UI test case, whatever you are doing for regular web based application testing, the same logic, everything will be working for API testing as well. That's the beauty of Tricentis Tosca, where each and every technology can be automated in same way. Even the API application as well can be automated using CPs, buffers, all those concepts can be implemented here as well. So in my response, I need to validate whether I have 201, that is user is successfully created or not. So the moment you select anything in your response, automatically the action mode will be verified. Right. This is the default action mode. For some cases, you might need to buffer this value. We'll see it in next attribute. You can always go and change that. And the ID property, again, by default it will be the 71 that was captured during the response, right? By default you can verify that ID is equal to 71 or not, or you can always come here and saying that I want to buffer this ID, something called user ID, okay, and I can change the buffer value. So I'm gonna buffer this user ID and I will be using this user ID in the upcoming API calls. Like that, you can always do that. So I'm gonna execute this case now. Let's see. So the test case execution is started now. The test case execution is passed. Let's see in Scratchbook what was happening. So we have given some username and all those stuff is passed. And in the response, we want to buffer the value. The user ID, it has set to value 906 now. So like that, you can use the existing syntax from web application like verify, buffer, all those stuff can be also used here in your API testing as well. Now I'm gonna see the get user. I'm gonna explain the get user, and I will be using something called repetition loops to see those concepts as well. So in the get user API, you see that multiple users are there, and we may need to buffer each one of them, or we may need to check the total of this. So I'm just exporting. So you have multiple options to export this into Tosca Commander. Either you can export this by request wise. So the last time I exported for the create user request alone. Either you can request at folder level as well, but now I'm going to export for get users. Let's see. Yeah, the get users is now here. So in similar way, we are gonna add a module attribute now for the endpoint, and nothing else is there in this request. So I will be adding for response. Response is so critical. So I will be adding for status. Status is now added, and here you have multiple IDs, right? You don't need to come here and saying that for ID, for this ID you need to add a module attribute, for the third ID you need to add another module attribute. You don't need to do anything like that. Just do control A and you have multiple options here. Okay, either add this module, just give me a minute, add this module attribute as a whole. I'm just adding that. The moment I added all the objects from a repetition perspective, data, under data, you see that something called item is created. Item is equivalent to all these multiple IDs, right? Whenever you have multiple items with same structure, then item will get added automatically. And under that you have ID, email, whatever you have. And similarly, you have something called support at the last, and you have these kind of stuff configured. There is no need to repeat your module attribute again and again if it is repeated in your response. It automatically handles by the Tosca commander itself. Right. Now we have added these module attributes. Let's save this. Let's go to the test case of get users. Go to details. You'll see the endpoint. The endpoint I'm giving the default endpoint now. And in the response, what I'm gonna do, I need to validate. If you come to this response once again, so there are how many users are there? The total there will be 12, but here in this case 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 users are here, right? So I want to validate whether the total user count is equal to 6 or not, or greater than 6, something like that. I'm gonna put my validation as a first step. So I'm gonna come in here, this item, this ID, how many users are there. Either you can go ahead and validate the total equal to some stuff 6, total per page equal to 6. You can validate that, or you can validate how many IDs are there. I'm gonna validate how many IDs are there. So let's see, I'm gonna add something called property count, count equal to 6. That's what I'm gonna validate. So the count equal to 6. Right, let's trigger the test case now, and let's validate the total count is equal to 6 or not, the users count. The validation is passed. If you see here right hand side under data, so I'm validating under item how many IDs are there. Verification was successful. There was expected value equal to 6 and then actual value equal to 6. So there are 6 users. You can validate all the count itself. Right, like that, whatever you are doing in your web application, same kind of validation you can do. The other use case will be you might be want to buffer all these 6 user IDs. Okay, how you need to do that? To do the those kind of repetition kind of validation. For example, in this case, you will be having users as 6 users, and you want to validate email ID of each one of them. Email 1 equal to George.blood, email 2 equal to other email ID. Like that, you want to buffer all of that, and you may be validating against the UI or database, whatever the other validation that you are doing, right? So to do that, what I'm going to do, I first of all, I need to understand how many users are there. There are 6 users. After that, I need to fire the same request and get the um, again fire the same get request, and I need to buffer all the email IDs, right? I have got the count equal to 6. Now I will be adding a new folder under this, and I will be adding naming this buffer emails, something like that. And the in the repetition property, I will be giving like the buffer of count. Just give me a minute. So I'm gonna add either you can directly give 6, okay, but since the count may be changing with respect to other environment as well, so I have already buffered the count value, right? So let's see what buffer I have used here. I did not actually buffer the value, right? Let me do. To get the count value of the parent node, you need to give something called result count instead of parent, instead of just count. So I'm going to give something called result count here, and that will be buffered as count. Okay, so instead of giving that result count to id, you need to give that to parent item stuff. That is the one it is keep getting repeated. So you need to give that in the parent one, item one, and I'm just buffering this the result count equal to count. And let me just execute this both request and response, and let's see it's getting passed. And I'm seeing that the data and item, the count value has been set to 6. So 6 times we need to repeat this. So I'm gonna give something called buffer of count now. So adding this buffer of count in my repetition. Directly, either you can give it a 6 or you can give this indirect syntax, which will be dynamic one. So 6 times this will get repeated. What I'm going to do, I'm going to copy paste the same request and response to that folder, which is getting repeated. So request will be same, and at each request, I need to buffer the email ID, right? So I'm gonna do email ID, and I will be buffering as email. Just give me a minute. Email, and it cannot be email same the time. If you give just plain email, then every time if it is getting executed, the email ID will get overwritten. So you need to have something called email 1 2 3 4, something like that. So since you have the repetition, you can just mention the repetition syntax itself here, right? That will get dynamic input. For example, the first time repetition runs, it will take the value of 1. The second time of repetition runs, then it will take the value of 2, something like that. So you can give repetition, so it will get dynamically changed. So it will be email 1, email 2, email 3, something like that. There will be a one more issue here. You need to remove this item. Sorry, it should be select with blank. So I'm just removing the value alone. Right. If you execute this, it will throw an error message. What error it will throw? Since it has 6 items, okay, 6 user IDs. So it will not know multiple which item you need to identify. So it will throw an error message saying that multiple items found, something like that. So every time you need to say that go and choose first item, go and choose second item, something like that. So to do that, there is a syntax called index. That property you can use. So I'm going to use index now. What is the value of index? Index value, again, it should be repetition. So that then only it will get proper values. Right. I'm just adding repetition syntax now. Right. So index equal to repetition. For the first time, it will take index equal to 1. So email ID 1 will get buffered. I'm just changing the action mode to buffer. Email ID 1 will get buffered. Email ID 2 will get buffered, something like that. So let me try to execute this. You need to execute from the folder perspective. Then only the repetition property will take effect. So I'm just gonna run this now. Let's see what happens. The test case execution is passed now. You see that there are 6 time execution happened, and each time if you come here under data item, um, the email ID 1 is correctly buffered. Email 1 is set to an value George Blood. Let's go to the second repetition. Let's check the email ID of the second one. So the buffer with email 2 is set to different value. So like that, there are different values are set. If you come to buffer value, you can see email 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, all these values are correctly captured. Now you can use this buffer in your next step or in your UI application, saying that just verify this or enter this email ID in your next application. Something like that you can always use. So that's all I want to discuss with you today. We have seen how to capture API modules, how to import them into Tosca Commander, how to use the validation buffers, how to use the loops and repetition, all those stuff we have seen today. Let's meet in different